This is Treblinka. Between July 1942 and October 1943, some 900,000 people were murdered here. In 1964, some of the murderers who were caught were to face justice in West Germany, and in this video I shall discuss what is called the Treblinka Trial, or sometimes the Second Treblinka Trial, as one perpetrator, Josef Hütreiter, had been caught, tried and sentenced on the 3rd of March 1951. Whilst describing the legal proceedings and sentences of those found responsible for dreadful crimes at this camp, I will also show you what Treblinka death camp looks like today. Here you will see the names of Jewish communities, mainly in Poland, which had existed for hundreds of years and which were destroyed at this camp. Remember that the stones with names on them may commemorate thousands or even tens of thousands, or in the case of Warsaw, hundreds of thousands of lives. The Treblinka proceedings were initiated by public prosecutor Alfred Spies, whose investigation laid the groundwork for what was to become the most extensive post-war Nazi trials in West Germany. Spies assembled a documentary record of Nazi crimes measuring 8.5 meters in length, consisting of witness testimony, photographs, camp reconstructions and administrative files. These materials, including the Treblinka case files, are preserved today in the city archives and remain accessible to researchers. The Treblinka trial opened on the 12th of October 1964 before the jury court of the Düsseldorf Regional Court. It continued until the 3rd of September 1965 and concerned crimes committed at the Treblinka death camp. Of the approximately 900,000 people murdered there, only around 70 survived. Almost all had escaped during the prisoner revolt of August 1943, and most of these survivors testified at the trial. In total, more than 100 witnesses were heard, including testimony taken in the United States, Canada and Israel. Witnesses included former prisoners, former SS personnel and individuals previously involved in the Nazi euthanasia program. A crucial basis for the proceedings was the preliminary investigation carried out by the Central Office for the Investigation of National Socialist Crimes in Ludwigsburg, established in 1958. 10 defendants were brought to trial. An 11th, Kurt Küttner, died before proceedings began. The main defendant was Kurt Franz, who had served first as deputy commandant and later as commandant of Treblinka. Born in Düsseldorf and raised in Rattingen, Franz abandoned an apprenticeship as a cook and voluntarily joined the SS in 1937, becoming a member of the 3rd SS Death's Head Sandarte Thuringen. He arrived in Treblinka in 1942 from Beauschutz as deputy to camp commandant Franz Stangl and took over command in 1943 following Stangl's transfer. Franz was widely regarded by survivors as the most brutal SS officer in the camp. After the war, Franz escaped American captivity and lived openly under his real name in Düsseldorf with his wife. He initially worked as a bridge builder and later again as a cook. He was arrested on the 2nd of December 1959 at his home on Augustastrasse 25. When the trial opened in 1964, he appeared alongside 9 co-defendants. The indictment ran to 243 pages. On the first day of the trial, the courtroom was crowded. A large image of the Treblinka death camp, based on a post-war drawing by Franz himself, was displayed. The defendants listened impassively as the indictment was read. Franz alone smiled and shook his head, a reaction echoed by some spectators. He was charged with joint responsibility for the murder of at least 300,000 people, the murder of at least 139 individuals in 35 separate cases, and attempted murder. Prosecutor Spies detailed Franz's central role in Camp Terror, presenting him as a direct perpetrator rather than a mere functionary. Amongst the most striking exhibits was a photo album compiled by France during his time at Treblinka entitled Good Times. The word good had initially been erased after the war. The album repeatedly featured France's dog Barry, a large St. Bernard crossbreed. Numerous witnesses testified that France trained the dog to attack prisoners and deliberately set it upon Jews with the command, "Man, catch that dog," causing severe injuries and death. Throughout the trial, France denied all responsibility, claiming that he'd never killed anyone and had known nothing of the murders. At the end of the first day, presiding judge Rudolf Gertleber openly questioned whether such claims could be believed in the light of the documentary evidence. France nevertheless maintained his position for the duration of the proceedings. Survivor testimony decisively contradicted these denials. Abraham Kolsky, a 48-year-old businessperson from New York, testified that he'd been forced to work in the undressing barracks where women were sent before being murdered. On one occasion, 3 infants were left behind. An SS man smashed one child's head against the wall. France then seized a second infant by the legs and, saying, "Come on, I'll show you how it's done," killed the child in the same manner. Kolsky was beaten unconscious before he could learn the fate of the third child. Samuel Reisman of Montreal testified that his wife and 12-year-old daughter were murdered in Treblinka. He described how France ordered prisoners to be hung upside down, nearly beaten to death, and then shot. Reisman further testified that France and fellow defendant August Mitter shot 25 prisoners in succession. Wolfgang Scheinberg, who travelled from Paris, testified that France raped women before their murder and that one woman was temporarily spared until she became pregnant, after which France ordered her execution. Moses Rappaport broke down in court while recounting how France shot his heavily pregnant wife because she couldn't run fast enough to the assembly point. In total, 9 of the defendants were convicted. On the 15th of September 1965, the court imposed 9 prison sentences, 4 of them life sentences. 1 defendant was acquitted due to lack of culpability. The life sentences were imposed on Kurt Franz, Heinrich Mattes, August Mitter and Willy Mentz. Mattes, as camp leader of the upper camp, the death camp, supervised the entire killing process, including forcing victims into the gas chambers, sealing the doors, ventilating the chambers, and removing the bodies. He was convicted of complicity in the murder of at least 100,000 people and of 8 individual murders. Mitter, assigned to the lower camp, supervised arriving transport, directing victims to the gas chambers or the infirmary, a place also of murder, and participated directly in shootings of the elderly and the sick. Mentz served time in both the corpse detail and the infirmary and was convicted of aiding and abetting the murder of at least 300,000 people, as well of at least 25 individual killings. Fixed-term sentences were imposed on Otto Stadier, 7 years, Gustav Munzberger, 12 years, Franz Suchermeld, 6 years, Erwin Lampert, 4 years, and Albert Rom, 3 years. Stadier served as administrative manager for German and Soviet guards. Munzberger supervised transports and later led the corpse transport detail in the upper camp, enforcing efficiency with whip and pistol. Suchermeld inventoried confiscated valuables and was noted for sadistic conduct, although evidence showed he had attempted to save prisoners on 2 occasions, succeeding once. Lampert, a construction specialist from the T4 program, helped build camp infrastructure and the new gas chambers. Rome worked on transport processing and later in the corpse transport detail. Only Otto Horn was acquitted. He had served in the pit detail responsible for burying and later burning corpses. The court accepted his claim of putative duress, finding that he genuinely feared Christian Wirth and had voiced disapproval of the killings and had repeatedly sought a transfer. In its legal reasoning, the court held that German criminal law applied despite the crimes having been committed in occupied Poland, as German citizens remained subject to German law abroad. It further ruled that the crimes were not time-barred, as the statute of limitations for murder had been suspended and interrupted by judicial proceedings. The court rejected claims of justification based on superior orders, ruling that an order to exterminate Jews could have no legal validity. It also rejected claims of coercion, finding that refusal to obey orders in Treblinka would not have resulted in serious punishment. The court distinguished between principal perpetrators, Franz, Mattes and Mieter, and accessories based on intent, initiative and control over the killing process. 8 of the 9 convicted defendants, along with the prosecution, appealed the verdict. On the 30th of June 1970, the Federal Court of Justice rejected the appeals and upheld the judgments, making only technical amendments due to changes in sentencing law. Kurt Franz, despite his life sentence, was granted day release by the late 1970s. Photographs from that period show him seated beside his wife in their Ratingen home. He later gave an interview to WWII television in which he again denied killing anyone and claimed never to have seen the gas chambers. His final release in 1993 passed largely unnoticed. Franz died in 1998 in a nursing home in Wuppertal. In other videos, I will look at the career of Kurt Franz and of other Treblinka perpetrators. I have already done a number of films on Treblinka, which you can find on this channel, and I'll give you links to 1 or 2 below and in the description as well. I upload every day at 2000 hours. The Holocaust is my specialist area, so you'll find a number of videos on it on this channel. On Tuesdays and Fridays I do longer videos, and on other days they are shorter. I also offer premium membership. The membership costs £5, €6 or $6 per month, and currently gives access to more than 800 videos. Some of these videos have been censored by YouTube for whatever pathetic reason that YouTube gives. I also face other problems from YouTube, such as censorship on things related to the Nazi period and false claims of copyright, which quite frequently happens. Unfortunately, now YouTube favors AI slop over researched history, and my materials are often buried under a pile of this slop, and there's nothing I can do about it. So for the moment, thanks for listening. Bye for now.